get started here since it's 7 o'clock. So we're continuing our useless box project today. So today is the last of our useless box project, and if you haven't joined us for the first couple, then that's totally fine, because we're going to make a drawing that you will learn something from, and it just won't be inside of your useless box. But today we're going to learn how to make a joint in Fusion 360. So Fusion 360 joints, unlike other kinds of joints, these are legal in all 50 states. You can make Fusion 360 joints wherever you are and have no fear of legal repercussions, because they're, I don't know, medical, I guess? They're medical joints? Okay, so yeah, I tend to not know where to stop with things, so I try to find a line and then just take a flying leap over it. So now that I've gotten to that flying leap over the line, we're good. So for those of you who are starting from scratch, you can start a blank new document. For those of you who are joining us in this useless box project here, you can open up your box. So this is the box we've been working on for the last couple weeks. We got a box, we got a switch here. Inside of our box is a servo that we drew in the very first class. And the thing that we're going to make in this section of our class is this joint mechanism here. So this is the arm that's going to come up and flip a switch and then tuck itself back into that box there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off let's go ahead and enter, and I'll hit escape. I'm going to turn off that component, and I'm going to start by making a brand new component. So I've got my box here. My active component is this main document component here. And I'm going to make a new component. And I'd encourage you, even if you're starting from a blank document, to make a new component here, because it'll be a good habit. You can't make joints work without components. So I'm going to name this component my arms, because it's the little arms that are going to be popping out of there. I guess you could call it joints, but it'll just get confusing because we got a folder called joints. So I would maybe not call it that. So I'm going to call mine arms. And I'm going to go ahead and say Oakley Dokley. So now, once we create a new component here, we've got that has become our active component. Oh, and I already had one named arms. Look at that. And, if you make this your active component, everything else kind of gets grayed out, right? And again, if you're starting from scratch, you don't have this, but just as a kind of interesting note here, you can tell the active component based on your drawing view. So if I change my active component to this toggle switch, then it becomes nice and solid and everything else is kind of ghosted out there. It's just a visual way for you to kind of see which are your active components and which are not. So I'm going to go back to making my arm my active component, and I'm going to spin down that little triangle, and now inside of this component I'm going to make a sketch, and this sketch is going to be kind of the framework for our arms here. So I'm going to click on the create sketch icon. I'm going to turn off my box. So my box over in my browser up there, I'm going to turn off the little eyeball, just so I can click on, because where I want to start my sketch is on the surface of this tip of my servo here. If you're starting from scratch, you can pick any drawing surface to draw that on. It's totally fine. So I'm going to click on the tip of my servo as the starting plane. And now I'm going to start placing some lines here, placing some circles. I have to have a couple of bearings. And I'm going to build my arms on these little bearings that I have here. So I'm going to use those as my measurements, and I'll kind of call those out to you. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create, and I'm going to click on Circle. Do I want to make a circle first? Let's actually make our lines first. So I'm going to click on Create, and then Line, and I'm going to start my line right at the center of my servo. If you're starting from scratch, if you don't have a servo there, I would start this line at the origin, just because we want to have this line kind of be locked in position. So I'm going to click and place a line, and I'm going to draw this line up. Now, I don't know exactly how long I want this line to be. This line represents the length of one of the arms of our servo arm here. But for right now, like 2.652, that sounds fine-ish. Let's actually type in 2.5, just so we have some measurement there, and I'm going to hit Enter. Now this line isn't straight up, it's just kind of at an angle here. I'm going to convert this line to a construction line. And the way you convert a line to a construction line is just by highlighting the line, and you can either hit the X key on the keyboard, or over in your sketch palette, we can click on this construction icon in the line type section here. And that'll convert it to a construction line. Now, something to note, once I've hit that little button, that construction line type button here, now all the lines that I make are going to be construction lines, and that's actually what I want. So I'm going to make several construction lines here. So I'll grab my line tool again, and now I'm going to again start at that at the origin, or for those of you who have a circle or a servo there, you can draw a line from that starting point that we used last time. And now we're going to draw a line straight, horizontal, and I'm going to make this 2 inches. That's just kind of a guess now. We're going to be kind of probably finagling these later. Now I'm going to draw another line. I'm going to draw that line from the end point to the last line we made. And I'm going to make this line like 2¼ inches long or so. And right about there seems fine-ish to me. I'm not being any really particular about the angles here that I'm making this, because after we make our joint, we'll kind of go back a step and figure out how long these lines need to be. So now we need to make 2 more lines, and these 2 lines are going to be connecting the end point of this line to the end point of this line. And I actually want to have a dimension here. So just because I connected those 2 endpoints, I didn't have to specify a dimension when I was entering or making that line, but I can add one after the fact. So I can come up here to the Create menu and choose Sketch Dimension. And now if I click on that construction line that I just made and move my mouse out, so I want to move my mouse not upwards like this, because I don't want to dimension straight vertical like this. I want to dimension like the length of this line at the angle it is at. So I kind of have to move my dimension off to the side here so I dimension it correctly. I don't really care what this number is. I just want to have a number there, because inevitably I'm going to need to change this length. And now the last line we're going to place is a line that comes out and reaches out just past our switch. So the key for this line here, again, this number the length I'm not really concerned about. I'm going to type in 0.125, 1.25, I'm sorry. as a length. Yours may or may not be different. It'll just be something that goes just past your switch, because this is the part of the arm that's going to come and flip our switch. But the key to this is we want this line that we're making to be parallel to this last line we made here. So if I move my mouse around, it kind of snaps into that position, and I get that little parallel constraint that happens here. Let's say you accidentally make this wrong. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and make that not parallel. We can add that constraint after the fact. So this line, and this line, I want to be parallel with each other. So if we need to, we can come up here to our constraints menu and choose parallel. Now you remember the rule about adding constraints to things is the object that I want to do the moving, I click on first. So I want this line to do the moving, and I want it to move into parallel with that line there. And now that snaps into position. So now we're done kind of making the framework of our armature here. And you can imagine each one of these intersections is going to be a joint. So I'm going to go ahead and make circles at each one of these intersections. So I'm going to come up here down to circle and center diameter circle, excuse me. And I'm going to make at each one of these intersections a point, I know it's 0.69 is my outer dimension. Oh, and you can see I don't want to make construction lines anymore. So I've still got my construction line type highlighted here. So I no longer want to make construction. So I'm going to make sure to unhighlight that in my sketch palette. So I'm no longer making that. Because that 0.69 is the outer dimension of my little weird bearing here. So that's going to be the outside edge of each one of these little arms here. So I'm going to make that same circle up here, 0.69 inches. I'm going to make that same circle at this third joint here, 0.69 inches. And I'm going to make that same circle down here on my servo, 0.69 inches. I guess in theory, there's not really going to be a bearing here, but it just helps for uniformity in general, keep it the same size. I suppose you could make this circle as big or as small as you'd like to. Now, I need to make the inner part of my bearing. And in order to do that, I need to refresh myself on how big this is. Alright, so it is 0.38. So now we're going to make 4 additional circles, concentric to those last 4 circles, and these are going to be 0.38 inches. There's my second. Actually, at the servo, we don't need a 0.38 circle, because that's going to be whatever our servo size is. So we need 3 circles that are going to be 0.38. And now our 4th circle is going to be whatever our servo size is. Our servo shaft is 0.23 according to my little snap measurement here. And now I'm going to kind of pause here. So I'm going to clean these measurements up a little bit. This is probably a good practice to be in, because I can't read any of those circle measurements, and I'd really like to be able to read them all. So while I wait for you guys to kind of catch up with my speed drawing, super speed drawing, hopefully I wasn't going too fast. I'm going to kind of leave this measurement up here and do a little check-in. How are you guys doing? Are you drawing along? What do you got?
All my measurements disappeared.
So, are you still editing your sketch?
Yes,
You got all your sketch tools up at the top?
I do.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
When I clicked on them to move them, as you just did, they just went away.
So, you're definitely editing the sketch. And all of them are black, which tells me that you have them. Try clicking Finish Sketch. And then open your Sketches folder. And then right-click and say Edit Sketch. There we go.
There they are.
There. So yeah, it may have been a weird graphics thing going on. So we just had an issue here where somebody was looking at their measurements and all their measurements disappeared. It was kind of like they were looking at this again. So what I encourage them to do is to go ahead and click Finish Sketch and then come back to your Sketches folder and right-click and say Edit Sketch. And then, like magic, we had lines that reappeared. How you doing, Mike? Are you with us? Kinda?
I started with a major malfunction.
Oh.
My switch, or my actuator, was 90 degrees in the wrong plane. So I had to flip that, but that's actually multiple bodies. So I was like some dog chasing its tail around for a while. I got that. And then I've been playing catch up ever since then.
Okay.
What lines are supposed to be parallel?
This line and this line are parallel with each other.
Okay.
These other lines are not, you don't need to be very precise about them at all, because we're going to come back and change them. Once we see how our joint moves, we're going to have to come back and click on these measurements and make adjustments to their lengths in order to make our joint move to the right position, if that makes sense. So let me give you guys a few more minutes. I know I could switch back to my Fusion screen here. Give you guys just a couple more minutes to finish up drawing this little sketch. I'll just kind of leave it up here on the screen. Joints are cool. I'm really, it's a cool thing to be able to add mechanical functionality to a CAD drawing. So we may do a whole joint project. We were talking about maybe designing a stop motion armature, which would be a whole lot of joints. And
I really like that idea. Still think we should do it.
yeah, in fact, we could call that whole series a whole lot of joints. Just, while we keep the bad analogies rolling. I should probably just rename this class to Bad Analogies. Instead of Model Monday, we'll just call it Bad Analogies. All right, so are we good?
I think so.
Okay, cool. All right. All right, so now we've got the joints part of our arm. We need the connecting bits. So I'm going to draw a bunch of lines that connect these parts together. And I'm going to do that holding down my magical shift key. So there's a couple ways we can do this, and let me show you a couple of them. So I can just click and place a line and try to snap it to this circle here. But I really like this line to be tangent. So I guess I could add a tangent constraint after the fact here. So I could come and grab this line and say, hey, make it tangent to this circle, and this line, and make it tangent to this circle there. And now it's snaps into place and it's fully constrained, right? But if we use some handy keyboard shortcuts, we can kind of do this right from the start. So if I hold down the shift key before I start making my line, and I hover over this line, I want to snap to this circle, And you can see because I'm holding down the shift key, no matter where I move, that line is staying tangent to that circle. So I'm just moving my mouse around here, and you can see it's rotating around, staying tangent. Now I'm still holding the shift key down, and now I can hover over and get close-ish to where I think the tangent point is on this next circle. And I get a little tangent constraint that's popping up there and snapping to it. And now I can click and place that. And you can see if I zoom in, I do indeed have a tangent constraint icon that has popped up at both of those, which is good. That's exactly what we want. Now I'm going to do that a couple more times. I need to make another joint or another arm length here along our 2.5 inch arm here. So I still have my line tool. I'm going to click this time on the large circle here. After I hold the shift key down, I'm going to click on that large circle, and then I'm going to connect that large circle to the small circle up here. You'll notice it's really difficult. It's easy to not make this one tangent. So here is not tangent, here's tangent. Not tangent, tangent, not tangent, tangent. You can really see how easy it is to not make those tangent. But if you accidentally miss, just know that you can add that tangent constraint after the fact. I'll make the other side of that arm. So I'm holding the shift key again, and I'm making, this doesn't want to make tangent at all. I'm going to zoom in here. So here my tangent point is like right in between those two lines. So I had to zoom way in order to actually get it to become tangent to that. Oop, and you can see, totally missed. Even though I zoomed in, totally missed making that tangent. But we can always add that tangent constraint after the fact. So I can come into my constraints and say tangent. And I'll click on the line because I want the line to do the moving. And then I'll click on the circle. Oh, that moved. But we're going to roll with it. Alright, so now we can place the last couple of lines that we need to do here. So our last lines are going to connect. Oh, you know what? I need one more circle. I need one more circle way out here at the edge. I'm just going to make this 0.25. That seems like a fine circle. Alright, so now I can make my last line. So I'm going to hold down the shift key. I'm making a tangent to that line, tangent to that circle, and tangent to that circle. Hold down the shift key again. I guess all these tangencies are just kind of my personal preference, because I think it looks cooler. And you should definitely want your projects to look cool. Otherwise, why bother? Craftsmanship, man. Craftsmanship. Alright. So, now that we've totally cluttered up our drawing with all sorts of lines here, we're finally almost ready to get started. And that's with the exception of I need 2 more circles. So before I make those last 2 circles, I'll do a little check-in. Tom, are you following at home? Or are you just kind of, both of you at home are just kind of watching, right? Okay, cool. Any questions so far? Have you guys ever made a joint before? I mean, you know, in Fusion you've made a joint? Not that one time in college, like in Fusion? Yeah, you've done joints before in Fusion, Tom?
Yes, well, not a
Okay, cool. Gotcha. How are you guys doing here? Good? Do you want me to...
Don't stop the class.
Don't stop? Right on. All right. Well, because we got time. We're running ahead. So, you know, we got time. No rush.
Well, I got one thing then.
Yeah.
I had a problem where I wasn't able to get something to tangent.
Oh, wait, what? So, is it? It might be because you snapped to. You don't have like a little tangent. It won't. It won't tangent. Like when you go to add a constraint.
Yep.
Ah, interesting. Well, let me come and peek because I'm curious.
You did a failed to solve error.
Failed to solve.
Yep. So there's that little thing.
So is it this right over here?
So I'm trying to change it this guy to here.
So my guess is where you accidentally snapped to that intersection instead. So, tell you what, what I would do in that case.
Can I just delete that line?
That's exactly what I do. Yeah. So I think the issue we're having here is we're not able to add a tangent constraint to one of these lines, and you can see some of these intersections get really close to each other. You remember up here I had to zoom way in so I could try to snap that, and it still didn't quite snap to the tangent. So what I would probably do in those cases is I would take that line and go ahead and delete it. And now on that second attempt, I'm going to hold down the shift key on my first line and make sure that's tangent. And now I'm going to click somewhere where I know that there's going to be no accidental placement here. So like that's not tangent, but it's also not nearing any other intersection, so I'm not accidentally clicking on that intersection, for example. And now I can add that constraint after the fact. And I know that it's not conflicting with some other constraint that exists there. That make sense? Okay, cool. Excellent. I'm just going to kind of zoom out here so everybody can see my measurements one more time. Maybe do a little bit more cleanup here. Cool. Getting closer? No? No? Keep going. All right, right on. All right, so I'm going to place my last two circles. And my last two circles are going to be up here at my top joints. So I just need some circles that the screws are going to go through here. So this is going to be, a 3mm circle, because I got a lot of 3mm hardware and I got to use it for something. Metric hardware is just better than standard hardware. Please argue with me in the comments on the YouTube video that I post. You will be wrong. Okay, so I'm just going to move these measurements up there. So I've got my 3mm holes. And I typed in 3mm, but Fusion went ahead and translated that to freedom units. So it's nice that you can have metric hardware and live in an imperial world here in Fusion 360 if you choose to do so.
You know, I saw a headline that the UK might be going back to imperial.
Oh, that's a terrible idea. I feel like that's gotta be clickbait. Right? I mean, Boris Johnson's not that stupid. Boris Johnson, if you're watching this video, you're a fine individual. Stick with the metric system. All right, so I'm going to click Finish Sketch. And now we've got a sketch made. Yay! Mike, do you have like if you have two bodies drawn, you'll be able to make a joint eventually. Do you have two bodies? Or two arms? Can I come and peek at what you got?
I have no idea.
Okay. Let me peek and see where you're at.
Okay.
The joints are fun. And like I said, we're running a little
I think what we have here is just a massive cluster.
Oh, you're good.
Carl.
That looks pretty good to me. Yeah, you just need one more like that comes out.
What are you talking?
So if you, where your sketch is here, see where my mouse is hovering over?
Okay.
Yeah, we just need that arm.
In other words, make an arm. Does that go
Yeah.
to large wheel or the little wheel?
I made mine go from the little wheel there out, and I actually drew another circle near the end there.
Okay.
So you could draw another circle at the end point of that line, and then you're kind of wherever we're at.
All right.
Yeah. So you just need to edit
So I
that
have to-
sketch, and then add. It's not a good idea.
I'm saying it's a good idea. I think it's what they're doing.
Let's.
All right, so we're almost there. Let me kind of just bring up our box just so we can use that as reference right now, or just so you can see that as reference. I'm not sure that our box is going to be big enough for the joint that I'm making, but I guess that's a good problem to have. Also, the position is off on this, so you can see right now the halfway point of my box is definitely impeding in the joint operation. So we're going to have to make some edits to our box, but I kind of knew that will be the fact here. Really, the deciding factor of where our box is going to move to is going to be how our joint moves. And we're going to do a little bit of manipulating our joint to get it to move around our box, but it'll be a lot easier to make our box fit our joint than to make our joint fit our box, if that makes sense. But right now we're poking up the top here, and we're not really fitting inside of it. So we'll also make some adjustments to this joint. But for now, I'm going to turn my box back off, and we can start extruding some bits. All right, so we're going to start extruding some parts of our arm here. So if I come up to this Create menu and I choose Extrude, each individual arm will need to get extruded separately. Oh boy. So there's a lot of little subdivisions that are happening here. So this is going to be one entire arm of my joint mechanism here. I'm going to extrude this out a distance of, I think I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch. I feel like that worked out good. And also, 1/4 of an inch is good because I think the way that I'm going to make this joint, mechanism is with the laser cutter. So if we have 1/4 inch material here, then we might as well make a 1/4 inch thickness for each of these arms. I'm extruding this out away from my servo bits, but you don't necessarily need to go, well, I guess we do need to go out here to get it away from our servo bits. Alright, so I've got my first arm all selected, and I'm extruding it out 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to say OK. And now I'm going to extrude my second arm here the same way. So I'll click on Create, and then I'll click on Extrude. And the second arm is going to be all of this stuff here. This arm that reaches up. I'm going to zoom in just so I can make sure I click on all the bits, all the kibbles and bits there. This will be the same distance. This will be 1/4 of an inch. It's coming out away from my servo body. And I'm making it a new body, and that's important here. We don't want to accidentally join this to something else. Something else that's also worth noting here is my active component is my arms component here. So is it kind of cutting off? Am I cutting off my fusion? Do I need to make an adjustment here to my display capture? Yeah, I'm cutting off part of my fusion. Let's go ahead and not do that. I hope that didn't mess up earlier. Hope you guys were able to see all the stuff I was doing here. All right, so I have as the active component, I have my arms component, and that's important when we're extruding something. If I have whatever the active component is, that body that I'm making when I'm extruding will become one of the bodies in that component. So just because I have my sketch made in this arms component, if I have my servo or my toggle switch as the active component, when I make this extrude, it will make a body not in my arms component, but it will make a body in my toggle switch component. So it's really important that you make sure you got the right component as the active component here. It's also nice because you can make one sketch and you can extrude out multiple components from that one sketch. We're going to do a cheat for that though. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And now the last and third and final arm that I'm going to extrude here is this top section. So I'll go ahead and grab my extrude tool one more time. I'm going to rotate around to the back side of this sketch so I can more easily click on all the bits. And this time I'm extruding everything except for these little 3mm circles. So the other times I had, because my bearing is going to fit inside of this little circle, and then the screw that holds the bearing will go into this arm here. Alright, so, and actually I don't need all that. I just need that little arm there. And instead of going a 1/4 of an inch, positive 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to go negative 1/4 of an inch. Because this extrusion is going to come out towards my switch and my servo, come out towards the back side here. And I'm making this a new body again. I don't want to accidentally join this to existing bodies. So I'm again making a new body and saying OK. So I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup of house here. So I've got a sketch. This is my arms. I'm going to go ahead and name that. I'm also going to hide it for now just to get rid of some clutter. You guys know I like to name all my bodies. So this is let's go with back arm. And then this guy is my servo arm, because it's the arm that's attached to my servo. And then this one is going to be my switch arm. So I've got my bodies named here. Now, you would think that we could go ahead and start adding joints to things. However, you will find if we go ahead and try to make a joint and we click on this, I try to click on one of my arms here, I go, oh wait, hold on. I just want to select this one object. And that is because you cannot make a joint with just bodies. You must have components. You can only make joints between components. So this arm component is just all one component right now. But we want to break this up so each one of these arms is its own component. And the way that we do that is up here in the Create menu. So if we choose Create and we choose New Component, now my active component is my little arms component, because I'm going to make all these components, all these arm components inside of my arms component. So if I click on the Create menu and then choose New Component, instead of making just a brand new internal empty component, I want to make a component from bodies. And when I choose this from bodies checkbox here, what it will let me do is select each of the bodies that I want to make into a component. So I can click on this back arm, this servo arm, and this switch arm here, and say OK. And you can see it goes ahead, and now my bodies folder disappears from my arms component, and I've got 3 new components inside of this arms component. So that's my back arm, here's my servo arm, and here's my switch arm, and each one of those has a bodies folder. This is why I named those bodies before I made the components, because now if I would have waited until after I made new components from bodies, I would have had to do a lot more renaming, so I made sure to do that now. It keeps things nice and organized. You'll see also that it made those components inside of my arms component. So if I close down my arms component, our new components are kind of nested inside of that. Make sense? So now we can make a joint with these things because we have individual components. All of the joints get made up here in this assemble menu. For the most part, the joint that I choose to make is an as-built joint. The difference between an as-built joint and a joint is an as-built joint is all of the parts that need to move with that joint are already kind of in place in space. So if I'm making this joint option, it's for when you have to take one body that lives over here and another body that lives over here, and in addition to telling them how to rotate, you're also going to tell them how to align. And we've already drawn all of our joints kind of aligned with each other. So if you need to align things and make a joint, then just joint is what you want. But our joints are already built, drawn in place. They're placed in space, however you want to say it. So we're going to make an as-built joint. Now, the kind of joint that we want to make is not a rigid joint. We want to make a Revolute joint. There are lots of different joints that you can make, but the principle is going to be the same for all these. So if I choose this Revolute joint option, the principle, again, just like with adding constraints, is we're going to have part of this joint that we want to do the moving and part of this joint that we want to be pretty stationary. So the thing that you want to do the moving, you click on that first. And then the thing that you want to be stationary, you click on that second. So this arm here, I want to do some moving. So I'm going to click on that arm. And then as the second component in this joint, I'm actually going to click on my servo. And if you don't have anything, you probably don't need to make this joint. Gosh, I don't know if you need to make this joint or not. I may have to come and check in with you later. All right, so I'm going to click on my servo as my second object. You can make a joint between 2 of your arms. We're going to eventually do that. And now I'm going to place the next thing it wants me to do here is it says it's got a snap position. This is where it's rotating around. So this little flag that I can see here, I'm going to click and highlight the circle that represents the inner servo shaft. And if I click on that, that joint animates there. And I can always hit this play button over here in my window, and that'll animate again. And you can see that, in fact, the thing that I want to do the moving is doing the moving. So if you do this, and like for example, if my servo started rotating around in circles, then you know, like, all right, I need to switch up the order in which I pick on which component. So the order in which you click on things does matter. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and say OK, because I've got that joint there. And I made joints previously, so I'm just going to turn those off so we're not getting confused here. All right, so now I've got this little flag, and I can double click on this flag, and now I can move this joint around. I can type in a dimension here if I wanted to, or I can just move this joint wherever I need it to be. We're going to go ahead and do that a couple more times. So this joint here, this arm here, I'm going to go ahead and make another as-built joint. So I'll click on Assemble and then As-Built Joint. Now this arm I want to do the moving. So I'm going to go ahead and make that, click on that first. Now the object that I click on as my second joint, I'm actually going to click on my box. So my box component here, I can use that as part of this joint because it's going to move on this circle. So if I choose that box as my second component in my joint and then make my snapping point that circle down there, then that'll go ahead and move around. And again, I can animate that, and it's doing what I was expecting it to do. So now I can say OK. And now I can add the two final, they're not really the final joints, but two more joints. The last two Revolute joints are going to be the same way. So I'm going to click on this top arm here, and then this arm. The order I don't think matters so much for two things that are going to end up moving. And I'll go ahead and place my pivot point there as well. I'll say OK. I'll make one more joint here. Now you can see now this one is swinging off kilter, so that is actually not how it will operate in the real world, I guess you could say. So now I've got 4 joints placed, and if I click on one of these joints, it's going to move all these things. And yours may or may not do that, but I believe I've got, I think I need to delete this now, because I made some joints before class in this file. There we go. If yours is doing something more like this, then we need to add in another joint that kind of keeps some things stationary with each other. So I have, you know what you may want to do if you don't have a servo or a box? You may want to just like make 2 other components. Just make a quick cube and call it your servo, a new component. So make a component called cube and then make a component called box. And as long as they're 2 separate components, then you'll be able to kind of keep going with us here. Because the thing that I want to do here, you can see it's not rotating how I was expecting it to do. And the way that I'm going to fix this problem is I'm going to make another as-built joint. Only this final as-built joint is going to be a rigid joint. So I'm going to make a rigid joint between my servo component and my box component. So my servo and my box are kind of locked in place with each other with this last joint, and this arm moves against the servo, and this arm moves against the box, and because my box and my servo are locked to be rigid with each other, now when I say OK, and I move this, now our arm moves like we would hope it to. And actually, you know, this motion is not bad. That's a decent motion there. I think that would actually flip the switch. However, I'm going to show you how to make some adjustments to this, because this is kind of the motion that we were going for. So if I turn my box back on, you can kind of see that it's going to retract down here. Now I'd like it to retract down past the top of my lid here, and it goes up a little bit too far. And I'd also like it to reach up higher. So I'd like it to be reaching up towards the top of the switch and not so much kind of like hitting the base of the switch here. So the way that I'm going to affect those changes is by clicking on my arms sketch. If I turn that back on and right click and say edit sketch, now I just have to change a couple of measurements. So if I want to change the angle that this arm is at, if I just make this back arm a little bit shorter by like 1/8 of an inch, actually let's make it a full 1/4 of an inch shorter. So I'm going to make that 2 inches, because I also wanted to make this arm a little shorter. So let's make that like 3/8 or so. Now again, that angle's not quite right, so I'm going to shrink this down a little bit more. Let's make it like 1 7/8. I think I could go even further. Let's do 1 3/4. Oh boy, I messed up a measurement somehow. 1 3/4. That's looking a little bit better. Now, if I wanted to, I could shrink this measurement down. So this measurement is between my 2 arms. So if I shrink that down a little bit, it didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. Maybe I'll make this a little bit longer. Quite a bit longer. This will be the trial and error part of the box, because your box will be a different dimension than mine will. Your switch may not be in exactly the same position as mine is. So you'll have to kind of, tweak these measurements to work to your needs. It could be that you need to, I don't know, if you shrink this measurement, what will happen? So if I change this to like 1.5, then you get kind of that motion going on. So if you determine that that's the best way to make an alteration, then feel free to do that. I'm going to change it back to 2. So I'm going to go ahead and say finish sketch now, and you can see that it redrew that, and it put all my joints back in there, and now I can come and look at my motion again. So this is looking pretty good to me. So when it retracts down, it's fully inside my box. I'm going to turn off my sketch. So when it retracts down, it's fully inside the box. It's not hitting the servo on its way up, and it hits at a decent spot up on the servo. I think that'll actually flip the switch there. So I think that'll work. So you may need to alter the size of your box. If your box is too small, you may need to go back to your box component and change that size so it fits in there a little bit better. Just for a refresher, I'll go ahead and click enter. If we do need to change the size of our box, I can make my box my active component, and I can come find that sketch that is my box and say edit sketch, and now I can go ahead and make that, if it needed to be 1 inch at 7 1/4 inches. It'll get wider out the back there, and I'll say finish sketch. And now I'll go back to making my arms my active component, and you can see I've got some more breathing room in the back there. Something I definitely need to alter on my box is where my break point is here. So I've got right now this servo, or this arm. If I that's my active component. Where's my joint? There it is. If I manipulate it up so it's kind of like right in the middle of the box at like 25 degrees or so, we need to make our edge of our box stop much sooner. So I'm going to click enter, and that will make that joint stay at that angle. So now I can change my box. I can click on my box as my active component. My box top here, I can go ahead and turn that on, and I can edit that sketch. Now we have a constraint here that this is the line that I want to move, and right now we have a constraint that won't let me move it. I've got a midpoint constraint here. So before I can move this line, I'll need to click on each one of those constraints and delete them. So on both sides, I'll need to delete that, and now I can move it forward. Let's go ahead and add a dimension there just so we've got something as a benchmark there. That is not, we're not making an angle measurement. Dimension, that line, and that line. Why does it want to make that an angle measurement? Something about this line is angled. Alright, so now I can dimension that. There we go. So now I can make that, say, 2.75. And then if I click Finish Sketch, you can see it moved it nicely forward. And I can go back to my arms here. Now you can see where that line is there. And I can go back to twiddling my joints. And it's just a little, it's just running into it just a little bit there. You can see it clips into it right there. So I'm going to hit enter here, and then I'll make that final tweak to my box. I'll edit that. Instead of 2.75, I'm going to make it 2.5. Hopefully that's not too far. Yep, it looks like my switch is still fitting in there. Still got room for I haven't cut off my hole there. One last time here. There we go. So that's it. That is our useless box. You know, just as a bonus, let's go ahead and because I like bonuses. Something that's not happening when we move this joint is our box top isn't opening. Our arm just kind of pops up through our box there, and that's not how this is going to work in the real world. So if we wanted to, we could make our box my active component, and we could add a joint here. Now I've got a, as you remember from making this arms here, my box is all one component. And in order to make a joint here, we need two components. So if I go ahead and say create a new component, I'm going to do that same thing where I make my components from bodies. And I'm just going to pick on that top of my box while I have my box, my active component here. And it will make me a new component that is my box top inside of my box component here. So this thing right here is my box, my new component there. Now I can make another joint, not a rigid joint. I'm going to make a revolute joint, and that line is going to be its pivot point. So you can see there it spins around, and I can say OK. Now if I move this joint here up and down, you can see my box opens. However, if we want to connect those two motions together, we can do that. So this joint we can connect to my other joint with a motion link. So a motion link, just as a bonus here in this class, it'll be fun exploration for you to do later. We did a lot of motion linking when we did our clock. So if you joined us for our clock project, so if you click on motion link here, and now I specify the two joints that I want to be linked to each other. You can see, oh, hey, that's a crazy animation. All right, that's wild. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And now if I come back to my box, actually, I need to click on that joint that is my servo joint here. There we go. Oh, it's really difficult to click on that joint. Alright, so if I click on it now, it's going the wrong way. So when I move my joint up, what I wanted to do is to move my box up. So I think what I have to do is right click on this motion link in my joints folder, and I just have to reverse that. So now, again, oh, that's actually not what I wanted it to do either. Maybe what I needed it to do is before I add my motion link, maybe I need to have my arm in actually the right position, because I think my arm, when it's down here, my arm is down here, now I can add my motion link and assemble, and then motion link. Sure, go ahead and capture the position. The link that I'm going to make is between this joint and this joint, and I think I want this to be reversed. And let's go ahead and give that a try now. Gotta kind of hide my box in order to click on my joint there. There we go. Now that it's obviously moving too far, but you get the point. The box opens. Our arm comes out, and we'll flip the switch off. That is one useless box. I'm 100% going to make this because I've had this on my want to make list forever. So I'm going to put a question up here, I think. I'm like going to laser etch a question, and then I'll have my switch say yes or no. And if you switch it to no, it'll just automatically flip it back to yes. So I'll ask yes-only questions or questions that I want the answer to be yes, and it'll come out. And if we want to see all my components, there we go. So there's our useless box. And we learned about joints. I'm going to go ahead and save. And that's it. Next week, we'll start a new project. I started like a document with project ideas in it. So if anybody has a project idea that you'd like to see us do for the period of 1 class or 10 classes, hopefully less than that, honestly, because people lose attention after like 3, I think. So if you have project ideas, feel free to email them to me or talk to me when you see me at the Makerspace. Cool. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you, sir.